ChatGPT or one of these 6 real alternatives, which one should you actually be using right now? I ranked all 6 against a live scoreboard, and one result genuinely caught me off guard. The 6 alternatives are Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, Grok, Copilot, and OpenRouter, and each one solves a different pain point ChatGPT creates. Alright, so Alternative 1, Claude, the coding and reasoning escape. You're paying $5 per million input tokens for GPT 5.6, Sol, and running it through real coding tasks, and the bill adds up fast. The question is whether Claude actually matches that reasoning quality at a lower price, or whether you're trading benchmark points for savings. I pulled the benchmark cards, and here's what the numbers show. On SWE Bench Verified, ChatGPT's Sol hits 74.9% with thinking. Claude's Sol lands at 73%, so ChatGPT edges it by about 2 points. On Aider Polyglot, both sit at 88%, dead even. The part that got me is pricing. Sol runs $5 per million input tokens, while Grok 4.5, Claude's price peer, comes in at $2 per million. So the coding gap is real but pretty small, less than 2 percentage points on SWE Bench. The price gap, though, is not small at all. If you're running serious token volume, the per million rate compounds quickly, and Claude matches ChatGPT on the Aider test entirely. So for coding at scale, the cost math tips the call pretty decisively. ChatGPT takes this one on raw benchmark scores, a 74.9% to 73% edge on SWE Bench. So that's ChatGPT 1, alternatives 0. I went in expecting Claude to close the gap on price and lose badly on quality, but the coding parity on Aider means developers who need to watch their token bill have a real option here. I've burned through enough API budgets to know that benchmark gaps this small feel very different when the invoice arrives. Drop a comment if the token pricing has ever surprised you mid-project. Okay, so Alternative 2, Gemini, the speed and multimodal escape. At roughly 61 tokens per second on GPT 5.6, Sol, you're waiting on every long response, and if your workflow touches video or audio files, Sol doesn't even accept them. The number to watch here is throughput, because the gap between these two is the kind of thing that changes how fast your whole pipeline feels. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. Watch what happens when you put the throughput numbers side by side. Gemini 3.6 runs at around 304 tokens per second against Sol's 61.7, so Gemini is roughly 5 times faster. On price, Sol runs about 3 times what Gemini 3.6 costs at $1.50 per million inputs, which works out to around 2/3 cheaper. Gemini also takes video, audio, and PDFs, where Sol is text and image only, though Sol still wins on max output length at 128K versus Gemini's 65K. Gemini takes this one, and the margin kinda surprised me. 5 times faster and well over half the cost savings is not a subtle gap, and that ties the score at 1 each. I didn't expect the multimodal advantage to stack on top of the speed and price wins, but Gemini 3.6 clears ChatGPT on 3 separate dimensions in this test. Now, Alternative 3, Perplexity, the research and citations escape. You ask ChatGPT a factual question, it gives you a confident answer with no source attached, and you spend 10 minutes verifying it yourself. Perplexity's whole pitch is that live citations are on by default, so the question is whether that research advantage is enough to make it a real switch. I went through the G2 ratings and capability breakdown. ChatGPT scores 4.7 out of 5. Perplexity sits at 4.5, so ChatGPT rates higher overall. Perplexity does win on research. Live citations are the default, while ChatGPT's web access isn't. But on coding, ChatGPT is a top-tier assistant, and Perplexity is basically just basic explanations. So if your work mixes research with any code, Perplexity hits a wall fast. ChatGPT takes this one on the broader scorecard, higher G2 rating, and real coding capability. So that puts ChatGPT 2, alternatives 1. I expected Perplexity's citation edge to carry more weight, but the moment coding enters the picture, ChatGPT is the only one doing the actual work. So, alternative 4, Grok, the cheap and fast escape. Run 10 million input tokens through ChatGPT's Soul at the standard per million rate, and you're looking at $50 just in input costs. Grok 4.5 cuts that bill to $20 for the same volume. The real question is whether you're giving up enough speed or output length to make that saving feel hollow. Here's what actually happened on the numbers. Grok 4.5 comes in at $2 per million input tokens versus Soul's $5. So Grok is 60% cheaper. On throughput, Grok runs 91 to 119 tokens per second against Soul's 61.7, so it's roughly twice as fast. The honest caveat is output length. Soul handles 128K max output. Grok is more like 32 to 64K in practice, so very long generation tasks stay with Soul. Grok takes this one on price and speed, and that brings the score level at 2 each. If you need to push answers out the door fast and keep the bill down, Grok is the pick, as long as your tasks don't need those very long outputs Soul handles. So we're at 2 each, and the next 2 tests cover enterprise integration and API stability, which is where a lot of people actually get burned switching away from ChatGPT. One of those tests has a result I didn't see coming, and it could completely change the call for anyone running production workloads. Okay, alternative 5. Copilot, the Microsoft 365 escape. You're in Teams, Outlook, and SharePoint all day, and every time you need AI help with a document, you're copying text into ChatGPT, getting an answer, and pasting it back. That copy-paste island costs real time across a whole team. The question is whether Copilot's native M365 grounding is worth the higher price tag. I had to run this twice because the difference is pretty stark in one direction. Copilot natively grounds in your M365 data, your emails, your SharePoint files, your calendar, without any manual context at all. ChatGPT needs you to paste everything in by hand. The caveat is that ChatGPT is cheaper at $20 to $25 per seat, and genuinely better at simple standalone questions where Copilot struggles. Copilot takes this one because native M365 grounding is a completely different capability, not just a feature tweak, and that puts the alternatives ahead 3-2. If you need an answer in 60 seconds from your own company data without touching a clipboard, Copilot is the only tool in this list that actually does that. Now, alternative 6, OpenRouter, the API stability escape. ChatGPT deprecates models and your integration breaks. You scramble to update endpoints, test everything again, and lose days of work. OpenRouter's pitch is one API key that routes to many models, so a deprecation doesn't force a full migration. The question is whether that routing layer is actually stable enough to trust in production. I looked at the stability picture for both sides, and neither one is clean. ChatGPT forces migrations when it deprecates models, which is a real production pain. OpenRouter's ChatGPT 4.0 endpoint is labeled research only and may redirect without notice, so you're trading one instability for another. Where OpenRouter genuinely wins is model choice. One API, many models, no lock-in to a single vendor. Both tools have real stability problems, so take that caveat seriously. ChatGPT deprecates and forces migrations. OpenRouter's ChatGPT 4.0 endpoint can redirect. But the decisive call still goes to OpenRouter for anyone building multi-model pipelines. One API to swap between Claude, Gemini, Grok, and others without rewriting integrations is a real structural advantage that ChatGPT simply can't match. This one lands as a tie on API stability since both sides have documented instability problems, so the final score stays at ChatGPT 2, alternatives 3, 1 tied. OpenRouter wins on model choice, not on stability, and that distinction matters a lot for how you'd actually use it. So why do people leave ChatGPT? Long conversations lose context and you end up re-explaining things you already said. Model deprecations kill integrations with no warning. Privacy concerns around data sharing partnerships are real, and the pricing keeps climbing after the free period ends, which is exactly what sends people searching for these 6 alternatives. And to be fair, ChatGPT still wins in specific spots. For creative writing, coding, and open-ended conversation, it's still the top pick in this comparison, and it rates 4.7 out of 5 on G2, higher than every alternative here. For image generation and OCR, ChatGPT's generator is genuinely one of the best available right now. For most people leaving ChatGPT, Gemini is the default pick, 5 times faster, well over half the cost savings compared to Sol, and it takes video and audio where ChatGPT can't. But if you're a developer who needs peak coding reasoning, Claude is your runner-up, and if your whole team lives in Microsoft 365, Copilot is the only real choice. One thing that didn't make it into the formal tests, ChatGPT's free tier caps you at roughly 20 messages per day on the flagship model, and even the $200 Pro plan only gets you around 800. If you hit that wall mid-project, the tool just stops. And none of the alternatives here have a hard daily message cap structured that way. If you want to go deeper on the free options specifically, I put together a ranked breakdown called Best Free ChatGPT Alternatives That Actually Work, and it covers the tools that cost you nothing but still hold up on real tasks, so if budget is the main reason you're switching, that one's worth watching next.